This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So I co-chaired this agriculture and climate cluster along with Brian Wee. So I'm at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, the data center. Here we go, alphabetical.
I can call people like down the list if that helps.
Okay.
I'll introduce myself first. This is Ellie Davis. I am the Community Fellow for the Ag and Climate Cluster, and I'm a PhD student at the University of South Carolina. Megan, do you want to say anything else, or are you good?
Yeah, I'll just say I'm the Community Director of ESIP, and I'm here in a support role and play this role for all of the other ESIP collaboration areas. So I'm a great person to contact if you're curious about what's going on in the other groups. Excited about the call today.
Arif?
Yes.
Do you want to introduce yourself? We're just briefly introducing ourselves.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
Maybe mute Dan, because there's some noise coming from there. Maybe that will help Arif. Thanks.
Hi, Arif. Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can now.
Okay. We're just introducing ourselves briefly.
Okay. My name is Arif Albayrak, and I'm from GetSpace working with Bill. And I do concentrate on concept maps and some other related subjects for the agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Hi, my name is Brian Wee. Together with Bill Ting, I co-chair with the Ag and Climate Cluster with Bill Ting, and my interests are widespread, but just for this short introduction, it suffices to know that I am very interested in connecting the science, the technology, and the policy pieces of climate solutions together, just what you will hear later in this talk. That's it.
Great. And then caller 1, do you know who you are? I'm not sure. We'll come back.
That might be me.
Oh, that is you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm James McKinnon. I joined with the web interface, and I see my name on there, but I also see caller 1, so I guess it's not connected. So I'm James McKinnon. I also work at Goddard. I'm a machine learning researcher, and in particular, in the past, I've studied like wildfire detection from orbit using onboard processors and a bunch of other stuff, ML related. Bill told me about this meeting, so yeah, that's it.
Great. And then if someone wants to guess who caller 2 is, or we can move on to Daniel and then come back to whoever didn't get introduced. So let's just do that. Daniel?
Hi, I'm Daniel Fuca. I'm actually a research scientist at Virginia Tech University, and I'm in the biological systems engineering, used to be called agricultural engineering back in the day. And I work on everything from sensing and developing small sensors to brokering data, that is getting data from one scientific domain to the other with as little work as possible.
Great. And then Jessica?
Hello, I'm new here. Like I said, I'm a postdoc at the Geological Survey in Denver, Colorado. My interest here is that I stumbled across the data and decisions, or data in decisions, something like that, old defunct working group, and I was interested in what kind of efforts were going on with respect to that idea. My current research is focusing on understanding data provenance with respect to wildlife monitoring data, and also the tools that we're using to communicate these data to practitioners.
Very cool. Catherine?
Yeah, this is Catherine Rowden. I'm with the National Weather Service. I'm the hydrology program manager for the Western US region, and I also lead our agency's post-wildfire flash flood and debris flow team. So highly interested in remote sensing products and helping us get at that hazard as soon as possible. Hopefully maybe even someday before the fires, and do hazard assessments before we need them.
Great. And Laura?
Hi guys, my name is Laura Zhang. I'm currently at Goddard and I'm continuing a project from my last summer's internship that has to do with knowledge graphs and connecting earth science and machine learning domains. And I'm an incoming graduate student at the University of Maryland.
Great. And then Latifa?
Hi, I'm Latifa Yusuf with ARS. I'm a data scientist at NAL in Beltsville. So I work with, do a lot of machine learning and natural language processing. So just thought that I should also be involved in this meeting and just hear what people are working on.
Cool. And then who are we missing? Who is caller 2? Did anyone
Hello,
not
this
get
is Si Juan. I just joined.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi. I'm working with Latifa. We're working at National Agricultural Library for a data science project, and we're encouraged to attend this meeting to learn more about the agriculture related and also data science related knowledge.
Great. Thank you all. Bill, back to you. I think that's everyone.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ellie. Let me see. Okay. Looking for the sharing.
Oh, I can do that.
Oh, okay. Great, thanks.
There you go.
Great. You see my, you see the agenda, right, on my screen?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you everybody for joining today. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through a short list of news and reminders before we get into the two main agenda items shortly. So so the first one is just a reminder about the Slack channel, right? So Ellie set that up last time, the ag-climate. So if you haven't done so, you would like to, please join, because we are trying to transition or at least add this additional communication method to our cluster exchange. So and the instruction to join is here. And also just if you couldn't make last week's April 28th, the concept mapping webinar, there's a recording of that. The link is shown here, and Brian's presentation starts at around 7:45. So if you want to skip the earlier several minutes of entering, if they go to 7:45. The third one, we're very excited. So so as you probably most of you know, the East of Summer meeting in July will be virtual. Our back-to-back sessions proposal, the titles here, Community Concept Mapping for Data to Decisions, and there'll be a couple use cases related to climate adaptation and disasters. So that has been accepted, and in the draft schedule right now, it's listed for the first day, the 14th of July, so back-to-back session, the 2 to 3:30 session, and then the 4 to 5:30 with the half-hour break in between. So that gives us 3 hours total to kind of structure our what we want to do, and we'll get to that later. And there's an ESIP questionnaire on virtualizing the summer meeting, so we will be responding to that at the end of this week. And the last thing is there is this U.S. Forest Service call for ideas and virtual pitch fest related to your USFS management decision needs. So and it's also due end of this week. So we are thinking about, one, whether to do it, and two, what is it that we want to do it on. And the initial idea is that we have this wildfires use case that would seem to fit at least one of the or some of the themes of this call. So that's something that we may be doing. So we'll keep you updated on that. So that's it for the news reminder. Any questions or comments before we move on to the main agenda items?
I just wanted to chime in and maybe post this. I actually just saw that there's an opportunity for people, and I'll post it on the Slack as well. It's what is it? It's a competition for global wheat detection on Kaggle, and it might be something that some of our members would be interested in participating in. So I'll post it on the agenda and also.
Is it global or what detection? I missed that.
Global wheat detection. So using, using imagery to, and I guess any type of coding. So either like machine learning or neural nets or whatever way you want to detect wheat. They're looking for help.
Okay. So and wheat the crop, right?
Yes, wheat the crop.
Okay.
And there's a $15,000 prize potential. So if someone is really passionate about wheat.
That's interesting because, for that kind of work has been around for some time. So if they're still having a competition, that's, I have to look into it. Well, what specifically they're looking for. Okay, once you post that, I'll take a look at it. Yeah, thanks. Anybody else before we move on? Okay, so the two main things today, right? One, we want to just update on where we are and where we're going with concept maps for data to decisions. And the other one is on the how do we want to format or structure our summer sessions. So for the first one, so Brian, so you had since the last telecon, and actually since just around last week's the webinar on concept map, Brian did another kind of a draft of the beginning of a wildfires concept map. Right now, still mostly on the mitigation part of it, and not so much into response yet. I thought, Brian, if you could just give a brief summary of what that concept map is, and also, the related concept map link to that, and just so people can know where we are going, and in particular for James and Catherine, I think it'll be of interest. And then we can talk about the topics of templates and reuse and repurposing. So do you want to, can you just give a brief update on that?
Sure. Ellie, could you make me the presenter so that I can share the screen? Okay, thank you. Let me see. Start sharing my screen on monitor one. Blah blah blah, and let's go. I think, do you see my screen yet? Maybe. No one sees the screen. Okay, never mind. Hang on.
Here you go.
Blonk. Whoops. I think I just stopped it accidentally. Wait, do you see my screen now?
I saw a brief momentarily.
Let me try that again. Oh, wait, hang on. I got it. Yes, here now.
Okay.
So a quick overview for those who are joining us for the first time of what we are doing before I show you the wildfire use case that Bill mentioned. So what we're doing here, it looks like a pretty scary diagram, but this diagram, I will not go through it in all detail because it takes a bit of time, but this is kind of the big picture of what we're trying to do. Let me just start on the left-hand side of the diagram. So, as you guys were introducing yourselves, I heard the word provenance, and basically what you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen, is the sort of provenance. We, like the kinds of provenance that a lot of ESIP folks have been working on, capture the steps, the transformation of data into data through code into data products. So like using the W3C Prof schema, for example. And so that is not quite what we are focusing on in this cluster work. We're taking it beyond that point where you have data products, and the data products are almost always linked to, well, the data products should preferably be linked to publications or assessments like national climate assessments, right? Where you have the pointers from your journal publications back to your data products. And so from your data products, if you can lay your hands on the provenance metadata, you can figure out how it gets all the way back to data. So what we've been playing with, and what I'll show you over the past 2 months, this is a new initiative, is to start at the decisions and try to do the same thing as in capture the provenance to the information, and ultimately, of course, you can get it all the way back to the data. And we are trying to do that by asking for your help in documenting what you understand by how data is transformed. For example, where my cursor is hovering over, how data is transformed into data products, or roughly around here where my cursor is hovering over, how data is transformed into scientific assessments and into journal publications. And then ultimately, where we are also focused on is how, for example, national policies dictate what types of scientific assessments you need to do for a particular problem. So, for example, if you're trying to build a new factory, for example, no, that's not a good example. If you are the mayor of Hoboken in New Jersey, you're the mayor of the town of Hoboken, and you are building seawalls, right? New seawalls, so that your Hoboken is more resilient to the impacts of future climate change. You need, as the mayor, you need to actually follow the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires you to do certain things in terms of scientific assessments. And so what we're trying to do is to start at that end to see what the national law requires you to do, what are the kinds of scientific assessments that you're required to do, and to capture that. Somebody on the call mentioned earlier about biodiversity. And so if you think about, for example, Endangered Species Act, right, the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, in order for actions to be stood up and to be defendable in court, there are a series of things that you need to do to keep in mind to prove that whatever you're doing will not harm species under threat. And one way of doing that, of course, is to make sure that whatever your decisions that you turn up with at the agencies are technically defensible and traceable back to data, so that you can prove, if you're ever hauled to court, that your decisions are made on good science, right? So it's science-informed, data-driven decisions. And that's what the theme of a lot of the work here we're trying to do. It must be science-informed, it must be data-driven. It's not just data-driven, it's not just science-driven, but these two conditions have to exist. So that's what we're trying to do. And later, when we go on to discussions about what we should do for the summer meeting, Bill and I have been talking, and Bill, myself, and Arif have been talking, and so we're hoping that you guys would contribute concept maps, which I will show an example of as we work up to the summer meeting. So like for example, Bill has contributed a concept map on the technology that his group has developed, data rods, which is something that I will quickly show you. So a data rods concept map could look something like this. You know, the stuff that my cursor is hovering over, and I've developed a couple of example concept maps about you know, how the U.S. government works, quote unquote. You know, how Article 1, Article 2 of the Constitution, you know, gives you the Congress and the executive branch, and what the executive branch does in terms of passing statutes that require scientists to do certain things. For example, when you are designing your infrastructure for resilience, or when you are trying to protect your species under threat. So I'm working backwards from here, and we have about 2 use cases. So all these are structured in terms of what you see here as narratives, which is essentially it's a story. We have 2 narratives that I'm going to show you very briefly. I will not show you the first narrative which we created, which is based in the Chesapeake Bay area. It's focused on water quality and the impacts of climate change on future precipitation pattern, which causes flashy precipitation patterns, and its impact on chicken farming here in the Chesapeake Bay area, where the flashy precipitation is going to induce quite a bit of runoff into the watershed, impairing water quality, and that hits you in terms of, you know, somebody's going to be sued over violating the Clean Water Act because of the pollutants in the water. And so that's one narrative which we have done, which I will not show. I will show you the second narrative, which is more recent, which is on community wildfire planning in Colorado. We're very specific here. It pays to be very specific when you're thinking about use cases. So we are focusing mainly on Colorado. So the use case that you are about to see is on mitigation against wildfire. Again, very important, mitigation, not response. However, in our next phase, which I'm a little bit late on, the third narrative that we're working on is on response to a wildfire. And when a wildfire runs through a spot on the land, as happened in Colorado multiple times, communities face the threat of debris runoff and landslides and flooding, as has happened again in Colorado after wildfires. And in fact, in 2013, near the Boulder area, one of the wildfires actually caused drinking water quality drinking problems, because the sediment runoff from the hillsides, from the denuded hillsides, ran off into the reservoirs that serve Boulder, and so that there were issues there. So that is the third narrative which we are going to work on. It's not ready yet, right? So I'm going to show you only the second narrative, the community mitigation and data to decisions narrative. But this part is for those of you guys who work on a little bit more of the machine learning, AI, natural language processing stuff. Now, again, we will not go through this in detail, but the narratives can be used to tell your community of what stuff that you have done. Maybe you've developed certain models, or you've developed data products, right? So you can use existing entries in a concept map to tell the story to your community or to your bosses about what you have been doing, right? You can chain these things up, you can chain concepts up. Now, this stuff here on the right-hand side is slightly more advanced and definitely out of scope of this project. But we have kind of a rough idea of how you could use these concept maps that are created to actually do discovery, meaning you could be another community, say in somewhere in Washington State, where you might have some similar problems regarding wildfires and water quality issues, And so this genome library contains kind of a signature, a fingerprint of all the solutions, the science-informed, data-driven solutions that have been published in literature, right? It contains a fingerprint. So this is one fingerprint, this is another fingerprint, another fingerprint. So there are, for example, in this library, there are 4 fingerprints, meaning that there are 4 existing solutions. But the idea is that what we want to do, and we have kind of a rough idea of doing it, how to do it, is for example, an emergency response manager. So in the third narrative that we are currently doing, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on something called BAER, the Burn Area Emergency Response, which is after an area is burned, somebody, for example, the US, if it's burnt on US Forest Service lands, some US Forest Service person will be put as the point person to draft something called a BAER, the Burnt Area Emergency Response. So within 10 days after the fire is extinguished, the emergency response commander has to write a BAER, a Burnt Area Emergency Response, to propose within 10 days, propose what the Forest Service team and an interagency team proposes to do to prevent things like debris flow from a rainfall that might happen, a heavy rain that might happen, not too long after the fire. So the idea here is for the emergency team, right, the BAER team, to submit a written form of their report, their BAER report, which they need to complete very quickly, right? So they write up in human readable text, right? It's just a Word document which they can submit to the machine. The machine does a fingerprint analysis of the problem statement, searches for a similar fingerprint in the genome library, and it tells the emergency response team, here are a couple of other solutions that other people have done in terms of how their BAER was structured to respond to a wildfire that happened in similar conditions. So the kind of terrain that this other wildfire happened, it kind of matches what you have. And that other wildfire happened in an El Nino year, and okay, so we are in an El Nino year, so you might the couple of similarities. So that is the idea, a little bit out of scope of this project, but that's what we're aiming to do. And so it is important that as we try to get your contributions to the concept map in the areas that you are an expert in. You might be an expert in machine learning, so you could draw up a concept map based on machine learning, but we are hoping that your concept maps will be useful not only for the narratives here, but ultimately it may have to be transformed further, but ultimately we want it to be reused in a genome, such a called genome library, for that fingerprinting process here, right? So I will leave it at that. I will show you very quickly what the mitigation narrative looks like, the narrative number 2. Now, if you look at this wiki, which the link, we will repost the link again. This wiki page that you see here gives you an outline of what we are trying to do between now, between March 2020 and July 2020, right? And what you want to do is to go down to section number 3, examples of data to decisions narratives. Examples of data to decisions narrative. Narrative 1, again, I will not go through. Narrative 2 is what we have done, what we completed last week. Narrative 3 for flooding is what we're trying to do right now. It's not quite done yet. But narrative number 2, if you click on narrative number 2, it brings up a concept map. So this concept map, we don't have time to go through the whole concept map because we have still have to go through talking about the summer meeting and what we're trying to do. But this concept map here, just to run through this half of it, the left-hand side, I will not go through the right-hand side, it's too long. All right, so this concept map is a narrative, it's a way of telling the story, all right? So the story starts with the 2012 wildfire season in Colorado, right? And actually, so if you, whenever you see a symbol like that my cursor is hovering over, there is a lower level concept map. Now, this is one of the concept maps lower down. I will show you what it looks like. But this is one of the concept maps that we hope in some way or form will be processed by the machine to create a fingerprint later. This is not, again, not within the scope of this project. But if you look at this concept map, it talks about major fires in Colorado. If you organize the wildfire seasons by 2012 season, 2013 season, and so on and so forth, you will see that like 2012 season, we've just chosen to highlight the High Park fire, which that's the one I talked about that ultimately affected folks in Colorado. There was flooding, people are unhappy anyway. The Weber fire, also 2012, Waldo Canyon fire, also 2012. So 2012 was a really busy year. But let me back up. So this is how you go from a narrative, right? A narrative that will be shown on the screen here, a high-level narrative, down to something more deep and more in detail. And so this 2012 wildfire season, as a result of the wildfire season, after that, what happened was Governor Hickenlooper, then Governor of Colorado, he formed a task force. Now the task force, if you look at the report, the task force recommended that folks who lived in Colorado start using this tool. It's a website portal created by the Colorado State Forest Service, CSFS, the Colorado State Forest Service. Yes, right. So the Colorado Wildfire Risk Assessment Web Portal, CORAP, if you trace it down, you'll see that CORAP actually ingests, and there's a more detailed concept map here. This portal ingests data from the land fire program. So the land fire program is an interagency program that actually ingests, if you look further back, it ingests data including not only just Landsat data, but you can trace it back to Landsat data. And from Landsat data, for example, USGS has a responsibility for computing something called the normalized burn ratio index, NBR. So using Landsat, so the NBR, which is, I did not document it here, but it is in the process of being documented. Landsat data is used to calculate NBR. The NBR is ingested into Landfire, and then it goes up to CORAP. And then citizens around Colorado are encouraged to use CORAP to draft a community wildfire protection plan. And there's a very important reason by law why communities need to draft such protection plans, which I will not go into here. But that is the idea of the concept map and the narratives. So this is kind of horrible. No, let me give you just very quickly before I stop. So what I've done is I've clicked into one of the lower level nodes, and this lower level lower level concept map talks about this conceptual model, a wildfire conceptual model used to inform the national strategy for wildfire management. This strategy was created back, I think, in 2012, 2013. I cannot remember exactly when, 5-6 years ago. But this strategy is still in force. And so this lower concept map talks about, for example, the management options, meaning the kind of mitigation options that the humans have some responsibility for thinking about. But also this national strategy also talks about the factors that are beyond human management, things like your topography and your weather, and So again, you can dive deep down into whether you are an expert in modeling how weather affects, for example, the flammability of fuels. This is where we can start drilling down into the science of it, or we can drill down into some of the data products that you use in these kinds of models, and so on and so forth. So this is where we are, and that's it essentially in terms of updates since the last April Telecon. And Bill has one more item on the agenda after the update item, which is this item. The item that Bill has is talking about templates for reuse, repurposing, and facilitating And so what we are trying to do, but we have not done yet, is to create a template. For example, one of the templates that we could create will allow you to create a conceptual model like what you see on the screen, a little bit easier manner, so that you need not figure out, you have less to figure out, meaning that we will give you a template to copy and paste. If you have a conceptual model, for example, if you have a conceptual model about carbon cycling, for example, you can use that template for a generic conceptual model template to start documenting how you, as an expert in carbon cycling, tend to think about carbon cycling. But it's not just carbon cycling. It could be, say, convolutional neural networks. All right. So if you are an expert at CNNs, and you want to share your concept of what a CNN is, and how do you create that window within a CNN network that scans for example, scans an image, that moving window. Now that could be also, that concept map about CNNs could be also instantiated from a template that we provide. This just to make things easier for you guys. So likely, we are not confirmed yet, but likely there'll be a template for some kind of, if you're interested in talking about technology, there'll be like for example, Bill created a concept map for data rods. Do I have it here? Nope. So that's on a technology component. There'll probably be a technology template. There'll probably be a policy template. There'll probably be a science and technology template. I'm not exactly sure how and what yet, but we're still working towards that. Bill, I'm going to pass this over to you in 15 seconds, so heads up. But just a very quick overview of the top level template. So if you look at the screen right now, this is, and look only on the right hand side, right? So the templates will probably be like I said, there is a policy template if you're interested in talking about policy instruments, wherever you're from the agencies, or for example, if we're talking about, again, Forest Service, the Forest Service has internal directives, right? Like in the case of a fire, the Forest Service has an internal directive that says within, I think, 10 days of when the fire has been put out, you shall create a BAER report. So that could belong here. But if you are interested in documenting, like I give an example of CNNs or data rods or OpenDAP, any of those kinds of technology. Oops, sorry. We would probably give you a template here to create stuff like this. Whereas if you're kind of on the science domain end of things, whether you're doing geochemical cycling or geoweathering, or large scale social environmental changes, there are many frameworks and concepts there. So you'll probably be given a framework, a template to get you started on contributing concept maps. So Bill?
Actually, could I ask a question before handing it back, or?
Whoops, sure.
Brian, thank you. You had, is it possible to go back to the example? I believe that you said that it was one that Bill filled in, that was specifically centered, and it had a ramification of finding problems with, say, a polluter, an agricultural polluter, or.
That one, yeah, that one was a use case. Let me show you. I didn't show it. I will show it to you using the what you might call it, the wiki, so that you can look at it later. So to find
excellent.
That use case.
And specifically, the question that I have on that, and it's a pet project I've been wanting to play with, but how do you actually to find polluters? We also need to be able to set up the models to find the places that are more likely to pollute and have runoff. Good to have data that is donated by the property owners or the producers, But how can we, and how would you view building the concept map in a way that we also prioritize protecting them? That is, being able to use that data while making sure that that data cannot be used against the person that donated the data.
Okay, that's a good question.
I think that the concept map is an ideal way to actually confirm that we're putting in protections.
Exactly, and so that when you go back to the landowners, if you can tell the story of how you intend to protect their privacy through a concept map, I think that it's somewhat easier for the farmers. I mean, and there's not any indication of what I assess the typical farmer's intelligence to be, but because if you look at actually the millennial, so there have been a lot of I'm going off track here, but the point I'm trying to make is that the farmers are actually extremely sophisticated people and not yahoos. So nevertheless, communicating in terms of diagrams and concept maps to very sophisticated folks. I mean like the folks on this call, it's easier to communicate in terms of this. This is a narrative for the water polluting issue. It's easier to communicate in this. Whoop, sorry. It's easier to communicate in this format than it is to communicate in words. But getting back to your point about privacy. So, for example, by the way, this is where the Clean Water Act comes in the water pollution case at the bottom of the screen. So in this case, what you're talking about, protecting privacy, there would necessarily have to be a concept map that talks about, for example, services that anonymize user identity. And actually, strangely enough, this connects to actually a piece of US law that went into effect about 2 years ago called the Evidence Making Policy. Oh dear, I don't remember the name of the law. Evidence-Based Policymaking Act. Yes, that's right. Which was rammed through Congress by House Speaker Ryan shortly before he left the House, and that's not a political statement. But so yes, if you have a concept map that talks about anonymization and you show it to your stakeholders, like here is how we intend to protect your identity, even though your data will be ingested into some model somewhere. I don't know if that will help, reassure your stakeholders that their names will not be given up to some lawyer who will sue them.
Keep that section right. If you and Bill could keep that section in mind for future discussions, I think I have an ideal group proposal.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, Daniel, I made a note of that in my notes. So yeah, we'll circle back on that. Okay. Well, Brian, thank you for the Wildfire concept map update, as well as some of the past stuff for people who missed the previous presentations. I just want to add a couple comments to that. On the template, I think in the ontology communities, it's a pretty common thing that they use to to reuse and repurpose and just to make things efficient. But I added that facilitating item to that bullet, and there what I had in mind was something that's related to templates, although it's more, what I have in mind is more like a structured form that people can use to fill in the information without even actually having to deal with the maps themselves. So here, I think Arif has done some testing experiments with that, where you have a structured form, the contents are filled in, and then because it's structured, you can convert that to whatever form is needed to be ingested or consumed by whatever concept map tools that you're using, or knowledge graph tool, whether it's CMap or Neo4j or whatever. So that's what I have in mind, and that's something we had talked about, maybe to come up with something like that for the East Summer meeting for attendees to use. The other thing I want to just mention is that, so this is mitigation, right? What Brian had described with wildfire, but also he also mentioned that the next use case, the third one that we are working on is will be more focused on response. I would just add that there's another element which is kind of pre-fire, and this is like the previous season actions. And here I'm thinking of this guy, Matt Leedy at the University of Georgia, where he has done work on using current year soil moisture mapping from a satellite, and then make predictions for the next season. Oh, okay. Actually, I'm not actually sharing anything right now, but okay, I'll use that. Yeah, for the prediction for next season. So as we develop the concept map, all these elements eventually will be connected together. So that's any other comments? I know we are running a bit short of time, but any other comments on what Brian had presented or questions, or before we go on to the last item, which we've already touched a bit on?
So this is Brian, and so folks on the phone on the call, you know, especially you heard from Dan. Dan had a use case and an idea for how, you know, we might start working on another 1, 2, 3 concept maps. So that's what Bill and I are trying to get from you guys. I mean, having listened to what we presented, is there anything that you think you would like to work on? Either, you know, I mean, you can get our help in getting started, or if you already know what you're doing, by all means, go ahead. You know, or if you want to discuss with us some ideas that you have, whether online here or you can contact us. That's what this call is for.
Yeah, I think what we might do is maybe just open up a Google Doc or something like that, where people can, if they come up with an idea, they can just, you know, enter there, and then we can keep track, you know, through a common document. But that is related to this. And Brian has already put in some ideas here about the technologies needed that we would like to, that we think we would need for some of the things that we would like to do for each of the July meeting session. So here the focus is on the whiteboarding technology. I just want to just point to the 2 papers that I don't know whether any of you has had a chance to look at it. So I just quickly summarize those 2 papers, right? One of them is this one? No, this one. Yeah, so this design interactive webinars. This actually came from the Discovery cluster. So Chris Linus sent that out to the group, and I was on their mailing list. So it's kind of like a design principle for interactive webinars, remote virtual thing. So I just summarized it, but the key idea here is to getting everybody to participate in some
Bill, I think you are fading in and out, and you're out now. We cannot hear you unless it's just me.
I'm also not able to hear you, Bill.
Me neither.
It looks like Bill accidentally dropped off. I tell you what, while waiting for him to come back on, Ellie, could you make me presenter?
Yep, making you presenter now.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh boy. Okay, just very quickly, another quick song and dance while we will wait for Bill to come back on. In terms of the agenda item on virtual collaboration, technologies needed for the summer meeting. So I only started exploring this morning. What you are seeing on the screen here is a collaborative whiteboard on this collaborative whiteboard called Mural, M-U-R-A-L. And so it will allow us, for example, if you guys on the call choose to join us for a meeting, what I have suggested there, which I'm going to in the Google Doc, is to use something like this technology, so that if you guys, for example, want to work on individual concept maps, like something on technology or something on social and environmental science or something on policy, you would each be able to team up in teams of 2 or 3 before the meeting, as in like sometime between now and late June, for example. Like there'll be 2 or 3. I mean, there'll be small teams of 2 or 3, or 1 or 2 or 3 persons, where some of you guys might want to work on a concept map about technology, data routes, and whatever. Another group might want to work on carbon cycling, for example. Again, is Bill back? Nope.
Yeah, I'm back to the phone. The laptop audio somehow got disconnected. Sorry about that.
Okay. So I'll finish this and pass it back to you, because you cannot. I assume you cannot see. Maybe you can see. I don't know if you can see what's on the screen. But I managed to scratch out in the past hour before the meeting an example of a collaborative whiteboard that we could have, where if 1 or 2 of you are working on some technology concept map, you could post a quick summary of what you did with a link to your concept map. As you can see, the nice thing about this collaborative technology is that if you guys have used Prezi, it kind of is like Prezi, as in you can zoom in quite a bit, but this allows all of us to post our individual concept maps or map in these corners. Either you do technology, social, environmental, science, policy, or whatever. We can rename these quadrants, whatever. But we of course need to somehow integrate technology, science and policy, and this is where we do the integration in panel number 1, where the ideas meet. And of course, we have a parking lot side of the whiteboard where these are the ideas that we need to work on next. For example, that we could do this. And so this is just an idea. Bill, back to you.
Oh, so Brian, do you want to share that?
Share what?
What you just mentioned about whiteboard.
Oh, you mean, yeah, I can. But wait, do you see the screen I'm presenting?
No, I'm still. Oh, okay. So you were sharing, because I didn't see what you were describing.
I hope. Wait.
I can see it.
Oh,
you can. Oh, okay. Okay. So you could just see my whatever happened to my audio probably messed up with all of it. Okay. So I don't know when I lost audio. So maybe I just finished describing those 2 articles, right? So the first one is the one that talks about the importance of doing what Brian just described, right? Doing something before the meeting and then following up, and then post-meeting, what comes after. So that was the main point of that article. The other one is about kind of more from a human perspective of the problem with virtual meeting compared with face-to-face meetings, right? So what I just experienced is one of those, problem related to technology, but there are a lot of other problems that this person identified. Now, we may or may not agree with some of that, but he definitely, putting his finger on some of the issues that, as we plan for the July meeting, we should keep in mind, both to avoid some of the issues, but also see how we can take advantage of the virtual aspect of this, because we can do certain things more or better virtually than face-to-face, even though there are disadvantages as well. And one of those we talked about, Brian, and we talked about is like we have concept maps, and we'll be developing more. And if we can get everybody to develop more, perhaps we can get others to critique these maps, particularly people who have the subject matter expertise of that, whatever subject that concept map is about. So one idea we had is that we had this wildfire soils response session at the January meeting, this past January. So one idea is to invite those presenters back to at least be able to critique the maps that we generate related to wildfires. And being virtual, hopefully it'll be easier schedule-wise as well as funding-wise to attend this meeting. So that's one idea. And even if there's a schedule conflict, we can take advantage of video clips that people can pre-record that we can we can play during the session in July. Anybody right now has ideas about how you would like to see the session to be structured? I know that we only have a couple of minutes, so we could just follow up with this, either Google Doc or something. We can, as a common place for us to share ideas about how we want to, do the session in July.
Are we planning on having breakout rooms or anything like that to discuss the different sections?
Yeah, that was one of the questions in the questionnaire from Ethan that we haven't done yet. But yeah, we haven't talked much about that yet. So we need to do that before the end of the week. What would that mean? Like a breakout session in virtual?
It means
world?
that you can take, say we had 20 people who attended the session, we could break them off into groups of 4 or 5 to discuss the different areas that we might want the concept map to cover.
So that group will be able to have like a separate discussion that only the group member can hear each other.
Exactly.
Okay, I see.
And there are pros
essentially like having
that because the breakout room conversation wouldn't be recorded. So yeah, just something to note.
Yeah, I think they could come back and report out at the end or something like that.
Right.
So that it would be recorded on the main part again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can decide on that, but I could see us using something like that for at least what we're thinking we want to do. But we'll put that. Yeah, we'll make that indication in the questionnaire that we'll return.
I think the only thing that we need to also keep in mind is we don't want to have conflicts with a couple of other sessions. One was the risk and the other one was the sensors. So if we wanted to go, if we wanted to make sure that we weren't scheduled in the same time frame as those 2 other sessions and possibly be back to back with them.
You are back to back. You are you are, sorry. Okay, we'll talk about this offline. Bill, if you can flag that conflict, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I took a quick look at the schedule. I don't remember all the details, but I just noticed that because there were more days, right? So it stretched out more. So the conflict should be, in general, less than usual, hopefully.
That is true.
Yeah. So it gets particular for, well, in general, but particularly for James and Catherine because they are dealing with wildfires related issues. Do you have any general comments about this wildfire use case specifically, but just in general the concept map, usefulness or application to what you're doing?
So this is James here. I like the idea of the concept maps. I have a few questions about them because I've never seen them before. I'll probably have to bring them or bring it up online or offline. But I guess the main thing I want to do is how would like a machine learning researcher's like workflow work into this? Like, I've got on my end, where is my data coming from? How am I combining it? What sort of architectures am I using? Or is that too like low level for this? Is it more like high level, like what are the models doing? Or is it really like nitty gritty? Like how much information needs to go into these CMAPs? And I think for them to be useful to me, that they'd have to be pretty detailed, at least on the on sort of the process side of the, on the machine learning side. I had another question too. How are these CMAPs like used, I guess, in practice? Is this like machine readable, or are there like machine queries? Like if I create a new workflow or something, or a new flow of data, does that fit into like an overarching like is this a knowledge base that I can like use, maybe like some decision making engine or something to figure stuff out for me? I guess those are my two main concerns.
So let me take
Can I answer that?
Sure.
This is Alex. Very quickly, in terms of concept maps, I look into the CMAP, and there are several formats you can export to concept maps in terms of text. And later on, if you want, you can translate them to JSON files, which is not that hard, it looks like. And once you have the JSON files in natural language processing, you can do the, for example, search algorithms and some similar ideas. Is that kind of answers your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was wondering if it was just sort of like we're looking at now, where we can sort of explore it like manually, but it sounds pretty cool, get into JSON files and integrate it into some sort of knowledge base.
That is the final, goal. For example, I wrote some small scripts. Let's say you have a tabbed text document or bullets. We can translate, if I work a little bit more on that, we can easily translate to concept maps and put it into the CMAP. And after that, maybe begin to continue to work on CMAP, and at the end, download them to JSON file. So then it will be fully machine readable.
As they James, as they are right now, as these the points that Brian has shown, as they are right now, they're more for communication between each other, and so they're not as is machine readable, but that is the aim, right? That we're the goal that we're going for is to eventually enable machines to reason from, and to do these kind of things in an automated way. Right? So what you're asking, what you would like to see is the same direction that we're going to move.
That makes sense. I guess it sort of brings it back to my other question, though. So you're trying to, get ideas across to a lot of people, and it's human readable at this point. And so I was asking, what sort of detail is involved with sort of like on the algorithm side of things? Because it sounds like those sort of plug into these maps as sort of like, oh, you can process this data with this to wind up with this sort of product, and that product can be used in something else. So there's this chain where the links to the chains are like the algorithms, right? In certain parts of the diagram. With sort of the machine learning stuff, I think machine learning researchers, especially on in this field, it would be useful to have like these really rigorous diagrams of like, how did you do the data processing? It's been my experience in the past that the most important part of doing the ML stuff is like, how did you process your data? And maybe even more so than like the particular architectures that you choose. So having that sort of information, like, you know, at hand easily would be kind of cool.
Yeah, so to that one, right? So the map that I did on the data rod, which is the point time series presentation of data from NASA. So the initial map I did was really just communicating how the process and relationship among the different organizations and parties involved. But what it needs to be is exactly what you're talking about. Is like what is the process, what is the technology involved to generate these data raw, these time series files. So that is, yeah, that's something that I haven't done yet. But again, that is the direction we're going towards. But this is like, it's a bit out of scope as to what we're currently trying to do, because that is, there's some work needed, well, quite a bit of work needed actually, to that point.
Yeah, so James, this is Brian. I would like to reinforce what Bill said about quite a lot of work. So when I showed like that one of the diagrams early on, you know, kind of the big picture view. One thing that so Bill, Arif, and I have been talking about this for a few months now, but there definitely is. We kind of know how to do this, but